The most confusing sight in Lekki Phase 1 that Tuesday morning was not the traffic gridlock at the Admiralty toll gate. It wasn't the noise of 1,000 generators humming in the estate because the national grid had collapsed again. It wasn't even the sight of a stray cow walking past the Wagon dealership. It was the sight of a woman in a faded, oversized bubu gown standing at the black marble gate of a 400 million naira mansion on Banana Island Road. She wasn't a beggar, though her feet were dusty and slipped out of her worn bathroom slippers. She wasn't a hawker selling groundnuts, though her hands were shaking with the desperation of hunger. She was the owner of the house. Her name was Grace. 10 years ago, Grace had sold her father's land in the village, her only inheritance, to buy the first 2 Tokumbo trucks for Rich Logistics. She had sweat in the sun at Apapa Wharf, fighting with touts and clearing containers, while her husband, Richard, sat in the air-conditioned office she had paid for with her savings. She was the spine, the blood, and the breath of the logistics empire that now controls shipping from Lagos to Kano. But today, the security guard, a man named Musa, whom she had hired, trained, and whose children's school fees she had paid last term, would not open the pedestrian gate. "Madame," Musa whispered through the small viewing hole in the black metal gate, his voice shaking with fear. He wouldn't look her in the eye. "Oga said if I open for you, he will fire me. He said he will arrest me. Please, ma, I beg, go away." Grace gripped the cold metal bars of the gate she had designed. Her knuckles turned white. Her C-section stitches, only 2 weeks old and still angry red, burned like fire against her skin with every breath she took. The pain radiated from her lower abdomen to her spine, a constant reminder of the surgery she had just survived. She wasn't asking to come in to sleep on her orthopedic mattress. She wasn't asking for the keys to her Range Rover Velar packed inside. She was holding an empty event feeding bottle, the plastic warm from her grip. "Musa," she begged, tears mixing with the sweat and dust on her face. "I am not asking to come in. My son is hungry. The baby is crying, Musa. Just ask him to give me 1 tin of formula, just 1. It is sitting on the kitchen counter. I bought it myself." Inside the compound, the heavy rumble of an engine roared to life. It was the deep, guttural sound of the brand-new 2024 G-Wagon. The automated gate motors whirred. The massive black barrier slid open slowly. Grace stepped back, a sudden surge of hope rising in her chest like a physical blow. Maybe Richard had changed his mind. Maybe he had remembered that the baby crying weakly in the bundle of wrappers in her arms was his only son. Maybe, just maybe, he remembered the vows they took 10 years ago when they had nothing but a mattress on the floor in Surulere. The G-Wagon rolled out slowly, the tires crunching on the expensive gravel driveway. The tinted window rolled down, but it wasn't Richard driving. It was Linda. Linda, who used to be the front desk receptionist Grace hired 3 years ago because she claimed she was an orphan who needed help. Linda, who Grace had mentored. Linda, who was now wearing Grace's diamond-stud earrings, the ones Richard bought for their 10th anniversary. She looked at Grace, dusty, tired, holding a screaming baby, smelling of breast milk and sweat, and adjusted her 300,000 naira bone-straight wig. The AC from the car blasted out, hitting Grace's face with the scent of expensive leather and Grace's own designer perfume. "Richard says stop embarrassing us," Linda said, her voice dripping with fake pity, popping gum loudly. "Go and hustle. You are too old to be a liability. A man like Richard needs an asset, not a burden." She reached into the console and threw a crumpled 500 naira note at Grace's feet. It landed in a puddle of mud. "Buy pure water with that. Wash your face. You look rough." The window rolled up, sealing the cool air inside. The car sped off, the tires spinning and splashing dirty mud water onto Grace's legs and the baby's shawl. Grace stood there as the gate slid shut again, locking her out of her life. The woman who built the empire,
was now a beggar at her own gate. And just as her phone buzzed with a bank alert showing her account had been frozen by order of administration, she knew. This wasn't a fight. This wasn't a marital spat. This was an erasure.
It started 14 days earlier, in the sterile white-walled room of the private hospital in Victoria Island. Grace was still in the recovery room, the heavy fog of anesthesia just beginning to lift. The hum of the vitals monitor was the only sound in the room. The pain in her lower abdomen was blinding, a sharp, tearing sensation every time she tried to shift her weight. She reached for her phone on the bedside table, her fingers trembling. She wanted to call Richard. She wanted to tell him the baby was fine, even though he had come early. She wanted to hear him say, "Thank you, honey," or "I love you," or even just, "Well done." Instead, the heavy mahogany door banged open. Richard walked in. He wasn't holding flowers. He wasn't holding a teddy bear. He wasn't holding a balloon. He was holding a thick brown envelope. He was wearing his boardroom suit, the grey one she had picked out for him in London. He didn't look at the baby sleeping in the plexiglass cot in the corner. He didn't check the vitals monitor. He looked at Grace with eyes cold enough to freeze water. "Richard," she whispered, her throat dry, casting of metal and medicine. "You came." "Sign this," he said, throwing the heavy envelope onto the bed. It landed on her legs, sending a jolt of pain through her incision site. "What is it?" Grace asked, trying to focus her blurry eyes on the document. "Transfer of ownership and divorce papers." Grace tried to sit up, but the pain forced her back against the pillows. She laughed, a weak, confused sound. "Is this a joke? Richard, I just had surgery 3 hours ago. Our son is right there." "You've been useless in the business for 9 months," Richard spat, pacing the small room. "Always pregnant, always tired. Oh, Richard, I have morning sickness. Oh, Richard, I can't fly to China for the deal." "I need a partner, Grace, not a patient. I need someone who can stand by my side, not someone I have to visit in the hospital." "I carried your child," Grace cried, tears hot and instant. "I built this company. When the customs officer seized our first container, who went there? Who slept at the port for 3 days? Me. I built this." "You built nothing," Richard shouted, his voice echoing into the hallway. "You are just the help. I am the grain. I am the face of the brand. You are just a liability now. A fat, tired, scarred liability." He leaned in close, smelling of cologne and arrogance. "The hospital bill has been paid up to this morning. I have cancelled the insurance. Get out of my house by tomorrow, or I will have the police throw you out." "But I just had surgery. The doctor said I need 5 days." "That's not my problem. Go and stay under the bridge if you have to." He turned and walked out, slamming the door so hard the baby woke up and started to cry. 2 nurses rushed in, attracted by the noise. They looked at Grace, then at the door where Richard had just exited. They looked at the sobbing baby. "Madam," the senior nurse said, her voice low, looking at the floor. We have orders to discharge you. The bill has been closed." "But my stitches," Grace sobbed, clutching her stomach. "I am sorry, ma," management said immediately. Grace realized then that the nurses weren't looking at her with respect anymore. They were looking at her like a trespasser.
Grace refused to leave the estate. She had nowhere to go. Her parents were dead, buried in the village years ago. Her friends had all been cut off by Richard over the years. He called it protecting their marriage from jealousy. But now she realized it was isolation. When she arrived from the hospital in a bolt ride she paid for with the last cash in her purse, the biometric lock on the massive oak front door didn't work. She pressed her thumb against the scanner. Access denied. She tried the code 1234. Invalid code. She pressed the video doorbell. The screen lit up. Linda opened the door. She was wearing Grace's favorite robe, the one Grace wore on Sunday mornings. She was holding a glass of Grace's favorite wine. Richard said you can stay in the gateman's BQ until you find somewhere else. Since you like to act like a suffering woman, it fits you. Linda, what are you doing in my house? Our house, Linda corrected. Richard transferred the deed this morning. You really should read what you sign, even if you didn't sign it. She winked. I didn't sign anything. The BQ is round the back. Don't come to the main house. We have guests coming. The gateman's BQ was an uncompleted room at the back of the property, usually reserved for storage or temporary staff. It had no windows, just open blocks where windows should be. It had no AC, no fan, just a thin, dusty mattress on the floor and the smell of damp cement and rat droppings. That night, the mosquitoes descended like a cloud. Grace sat on the floor, her back against the rough concrete wall. Her baby, wrapped in a shawl she had salvaged from the hospital bag, screamed from the heat and the bites. Grace had no mosquito net. She had no fan to blow them away. She used her own wrapper to fan the baby, swinging her arm back and forth, ignoring the tearing pain in her stitches. From the main house, 50 feet away, she could hear the hum of the giant, silent diesel generator she had bought last year. She could see the glow of the chandeliers through the curtains. She heard laughter. She heard the clinking of glasses. She heard Richard's booming voice telling a joke. She was the landlord, living worse than a tenant. She was the builder, sleeping in the rubble. As the night wore on, a rat skittered across her foot. Grace didn't even scream. She just kicked it away and pulled the baby closer, her tears soaking into the baby's blanket. I am sorry, my son. I am sorry.
Grace woke up to the sound of loud live band music. Talking drums were beating a rhythm that vibrated through the floor of the BQ. The smell of party jollof rice, firewood smoke, tomato and spices wafted into the small, damp room, making her stomach cramp with hunger. She looked at her calendar on her phone. It was the 8th day. The naming ceremony. Her son's naming ceremony. Grace washed her face with water from a bucket she had begged the gateman to fill. She wrapped her baby in a clean white shawl she had saved for this day. She tied her headgear, though her hands were trembling from weakness. She stepped out of the BQ, blinking in the harsh sunlight. The garden was transformed. White canopies were set up on the manicured lawn. There were massive floral arrangements. Caterers in uniform were arranging trays of fried ram, grilled fish, and small chops. She walked toward the canopy, her heart pounding. "Stop there!" Richard's voice boomed over the microphone. The talking drummer stopped. The music died. 50 guests, family members, business partners, church members, turned to look. Grace froze. She looked like a ghost at her own feast. "Where do you think you are going?" Richard asked, holding the microphone like a weapon. He was wearing a white agbada that shone in the sun. "It is my son's naming," Grace said, her voice shaking but loud enough to be heard. "Richard, it is our son. Who invited you?" The crowd gasped. A few aunties whispered behind their fans. Richard laughed, a cruel, dry sound that grated on the ears. "Ladies and gentlemen, ignore the mad woman. The mother of the child is here." He pointed to the high table. Linda stood up. She was wearing a massive architectural jelly and a lace outfit that matched Richard's. She looked like the wife. She looked like the mother. But she was holding nothing. "Linda will be raising the boy," Richard announced, smiling at the crowd. "She has the class to be a mother. She has the temperament. Grace is just the incubator. She did the labor, but Linda will do the mothering." Grace fell to her knees in the dust. The shock was physically painful. "My baby! I just want to hold my baby. Richard, please." "Security!" Richard called, his face hardening. 2 men in black suits, men whose salaries Grace signed last month, men she had given Christmas bonuses to, marched forward. They grabbed her arms. "Take the incubator back to the BQ. She's disturbing the peace. If she screams, gag her." As they dragged her away, her heels dragging in the grass, leaving 2 lines in the dirt, she looked at the crowd.
She saw her aunties eating rice. She saw her cousins drinking wine. She saw the pastor who officiated their wedding picking his teeth. Nobody stood up. Nobody said a word. They just watched the show, afraid that if they spoke, the free food and wine would stop. 3 days later, the hunger was unbearable.
Grace had run out of breast milk. The stress, the lack of food, the dehydration, it had dried her up. The baby was screaming, a high, thin sound of starvation. She scraped together 5,000 naira from old coins and crumpled notes she found in the bottom of her purses before Richard locked the room. She walked to the mall. She couldn't afford a taxi. It was a long walk under the blazing Lagos sun. Her feet were swollen, spilling over her slippers. Her dress was stained with breast milk and sweat. She walked into ShopRite, the cold AC hitting her skin like a shock. She kept her head down, praying she wouldn't see anyone she knew. She picked one tin of formula, just one. She stood in the queue, clutching the tin, praying the price hadn't gone up due to inflation. Suddenly, she heard a familiar laugh. Richard and Linda were in the next aisle. Their shopping cart was overflowing. Bottles of Moet and Chandon champagne, boxes of imported Swiss chocolates, expensive cuts of steak. And right on top of the pile, a package of human hair extensions, 30 inches. The price tag was visible, 300,000 naira. Grace tried to hide behind a display of potato chips, but Richard saw her. He didn't look away. He didn't look ashamed. He smiled and walked over. "Well, well, look at the CEO," he mocked, his voice loud enough for the cashier to hear. Shoppers turned to watch. A woman in a bubu whispered to her friend. Grace put the formula on the counter. Her hands were shaking. "I just need this for the baby, Richard. Please. I don't have enough cash." The cashier scanned it. 5,500, ma." Grace checked her hand. She had exactly 5,000 naira. She looked at Richard. "Please, it's 500 naira. Just 500 naira. For your son." Richard looked at the formula. Then he looked at Linda's hair weave in his cart. "Linda, do you need anything else?" "Maybe some perfume, baby," Linda purred, chewing gum loudly, looking at Grace like she was a dirty rug. "The smell in here is cheap." "Add it," Richard said. He pulled out his black card, the company card Grace had secured from the bank years ago. "Richard, the baby is starving," Grace cried out, losing her composure. "You are buying hair, you are buying champagne." People were bringing out their phones now. The flashlights flickered like fireflies. They weren't helping, they were recording content for their blogs. "You are useless to me," Richard shouted, playing to the cameras. "If you cannot feed him, why did you born him? Why are you begging me? Go and work." "He is your son." "I don't have a son with a beggar. Security." He signaled the mug guard. "This woman is harassing us. She is a stalker." "Please, sir," the guard said, looking at Grace's chairs. "Remove her or I will call your supervisor." He turned to the cashier. "I am paying for this hair and the perfume. Do not sell that formula to her." He paid for the 300,000 naira hair. He paid for the 40,000 naira perfume. He refused the 500 naira for the formula. Grace was escorted out of the mall, the tin of formula left on the counter. Behind her, she heard Linda say, "Babe, you are too kind. She doesn't deserve your attention." Grace decided she had to fight. If she couldn't appeal to his heart, she would appeal to the law. She went to the office. This was the building she designed. She picked the blue glass. She picked the marble tiles in the lobby. She walked into the lobby, head held high despite her torn slippers and the stain on her dress. The receptionist, a young girl named Tulu, looked up from her computer. Tolu's eyes widened in horror. "Madam!" "Good morning, Tolu," Grace said, trying to sound like the boss she was. "Is Richard in?" Before Tolu could answer, the elevator dinged. Richard stepped out with 3 foreign investors, men in sharp suits from China. They were laughing. Richard froze when he saw Grace. She stood there, a stark contrast to the pristine, polished lobby. She looked like a mad woman. "Richard," Grace stepped forward, "we need to talk about the company accounts. You cannot just—" "Who is this?" one of the investors asked in heavy English, looking at Grace's dirty clothes with disgust. "Is this staff?" Richard didn't blink. He adjusted his cufflink. "Oh, apologies, gentlemen," Richard smiled smoothly, a practiced corporate lie. "This is one of our charity cases. We help the mentally unstable in the community. Sometimes they wander in."
Grace stopped breathing. The air left her lungs. "Charity case? I own 60% of this building. My name is on the deed." "Security," Richard snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. "Why did you let a beggar in? Is this how we run a world-class firm?" The head of security, Mr. Okong, rushed over. Mr. Okong, whose wife's surgery Grace had paid for last year. Mr. Okong, who had cried when Grace gave him the check. He looked at Grace. He looked at Richard. He looked at his job. "Okong, throw her out or you are fired today. Now!" Richard roared. Okong looked at his boots. Tears stood in his eyes. "I am sorry, Ma," Okong whispered, his voice trembling. He gently took Grace's arm. His grip was firm but not violent. "Please, Ma, don't make them beat you. Just go." "Okong, you too?" Grace whispered. "I have children, Ma. I am sorry." Grace was pushed out through the revolving doors. She stumbled onto the hot pavement. Inside, through the blue glass, she saw Richard laughing with the investors. He tapped his head, signaling that she was crazy. The investors nodded sympathetically, impressed by his charity. Grace screamed, a silent scream that shattered her insides more than any physical blow. Grace went to church. It was the only place she had left. Maybe God would hear her there. She wore her last clean dress, an old Ankara that was slightly loose now because she had lost so much weight in 2 weeks. She walked into the mega church auditorium. The AC was blasting. The choir was warming up. She walked to the front row, the VIP row, where she and Richard had sat every Sunday for 5 years, where they had pledged millions to the building fund, where her name was on the plaque on the chair. She sat down, closing her eyes to pray, feeling the velvet of the chair beneath her. A tap on her shoulder. It was the head usher, Deacon Francis. "Madam Grace," he said, his voice low, his face sweating. "Yes, Deacon." "You can't sit here." Grace opened her eyes. "Why? This is my seat. My name is on it." Bishop said, "Instructions from Chief Richard. He is coming with a special guest. They don't want disturbances. He said your presence would distract the spirit." "Disturbances?" Grace's voice rose. "I built this altar. I paid for this sound system. Please, Ma, don't cause a scene. God is everywhere, even in the back." He pointed to the overflow section outside, under the sun, with the plastic chairs, where the speakers were blown out and crackled. Grace stood up. Her legs felt heavy, like lead. As she walked the long walk down the aisle to the back, the choir began to sing, "Great is thy faithfulness." The doors opened. Richard walked in, holding hands with Linda. Linda was wearing a white hat that looked like a satellite dish. She was beaming. She waved at people. They walked to the front row, Grace's seat. Richard whispered something to Linda, and she giggled,
leaning her head on his shoulder. During praise and worship, Richard danced. He waved his white handkerchief. He jumped. He looked blessed. From the back, sitting on a broken plastic chair next to the exhaust of a generator, Grace watched. How could God allow this? How could the devil dance on the altar while the righteous slept in the dust? She couldn't take it. She ran to the bathroom. She locked the door of the handicap stall. She collapsed on the tiles. 2 days later, the final blow came. Grace had been sleeping in the BQ, sneaking in and out, but Richard found out. He changed the codes to the pedestrian gate. Grace returned from begging for food at a local buka to find her belongings thrown over the fence. Her clothes, her baby's few items, scattered in the dirt outside the estate gate. It was raining. Her clothes were soaking wet. Neighbors were driving by, slowing down to watch. Mrs. Adebayo from plot 4 lowered her window. Grace looked up, hopeful. Mrs. Adebayo rolled her window back up and sped away. The estate chairman stood by the gate. "Grace," he said, not unkindly, "Richard has filed a petition. He says you are trespassing. We cannot allow you inside. Security rules." "But I own the house." "The papers say otherwise now. Please, don't make us call the police." She gathered her wet clothes into a black trash bag. She strapped her baby to her back with a wet wrapper. She began to walk. She called her best friend, Chidima. "Chidi, please, just for one night. I have nowhere." "Ah, Grace, my heart is very heavy for you right now. I would love to really, but Richard, he called my husband. He said if we help you, he will cancel the contract with my husband's company. You know things are tight. I can't risk it." "Chidi, we have been friends for 20 years. "I'm sorry, Grace. Send me your account number. Let me send you 2K. She hung up. She was radioactive. Richard had nuked her existence. She found a public bathroom near a bus park in Oshodi. It cost 50 naira to enter. She paid with her last coin. She locked the door. The smell of urine was overpowering, but it was safe. She curled into a ball on the wet floor. Her phone lay beside her. The screen was cracked. The battery was dead. Her breasts ached with a phantom pain. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten in 24 hours. She didn't pray a polite prayer. She didn't pray a religious prayer. She groaned. A sound torn from her soul. "God." Her voice bounced off the tiled walls. "If you are alive, look at me. They took my house. They took my money. They took my dignity. Now they are dancing in your house. Father, I don't want money. I don't want a car. I don't want revenge. I just want one person. Send me one person who remembers my name, just one person who sees me. Just one helper. Please. Or take my life. Because I am tired. I cannot do this anymore." She cried until there were no tears left. She lay there, listening to the rain pound on the tin roof, waiting to die. But death didn't come. A knock came on the bathroom door.
Grace wiped her face, her heart hammering. "Who is it?" "Madam Grace?" A male voice, deep, calm. Grace opened the door a crack. A man was standing there. He was wearing a sharp, tailored navy blue suit that looked out of place in the dirty bus park. But in his hand, he wasn't holding a briefcase. He was holding a power bank and a charging cable. "You don't recognize me, ma?" Grace blinked, her eyes sullen. "Who are you? You don't remember the boy who crashed your truck 6 years ago?" Grace squinted. "Felix." The driver, Felix, corrected with a gentle smile. The one Richard wanted to arrest. The one you saved. Grace's mouth fell open. Felix. The boy who used to drive their delivery truck. The boy she caught reading physics textbooks in the parking lot while waiting for loads. Richard had screamed at him, called him a thief, and wanted to jail him for a minor scratch on the bumper. Grace had intervened. She had secretly paid for the repairs, and then she had done something else. She had paid his tuition for university. She had sent him 20,000 naira every month for 4 years. Felix, she whispered, look at you. Look at you, Ma, Felix said gently. His eyes were sad, filled with a profound respect. I saw what happened at the church. I was in the back row. I saw where they made you sit. I have nothing, Felix. Richard took everything. I am sleeping in a bathroom. He didn't take your seeds, Ma, Felix said. He stepped forward. I watered you when I was dry. Now I am a tree, and trees give shade. He handed her the charger. Plug your phone, Ma. We have work to do. Felix wasn't just a graduate. He was the CEO of Z-Tech Solutions. He was a billionaire. He had developed a logistics software that was now used by Amazon and DHL. He had just returned from Silicon Valley. I tried to find you, Felix explained as he drove Grace in a tinted Rolls-Royce Phantom. The car was silent, gliding over the potholes of Lagos. I heard rumors, but I didn't know it was this bad until I saw you today. Grace sat in the soft leather seat eating a burger Felix had bought her. It tasted like life. She drank the cold water, feeling it hydrate her withered cells. He calls me a liability, Felix. He says I'm useless. Felix tapped his iPad. He pulled up a document. A liability doesn't own the intellectual property rights to the company logo, Felix said. What? I checked the registry. Richard forgot something. He was arrogant. When you registered the company 10 years ago, you put the trademark and the logo in your middle name. Technically, Richie Logistics is using your brand illegally. Every truck, every letterhead, every invoice, it's copyright infringement. Grace sat up straighter. I did that because Richard had bad credit then. I forgot. He forgot too, but that's not all. Felix smiled, a dangerous, shark-like smile. I know he forged your signature. How do you know? Because I hacked his WhatsApp. Grace gasped, Felix! Ma, sometimes you have to fight fire with a volcano. Listen to this. He played a voice note. Richard's voice, babe, don't worry. I practiced her signature for 3 weeks. The lawyers suspect nothing. I paid the notary 500k to look away. Once she starves for another month, she will sign the divorce papers just to get food. She's weak, she's broken. Linda's voice. Just make sure the accounts are cleared before the birthday gala. I want to announce my new foundation, the Linda Foundation for Orphans. It sounds good, Abi? Grace listened. The tears didn't come this time. Fire came, a hot, burning rage that started in her belly and moved to her chest. His birthday gala, Grace said, is on Friday. At the Civic Center, Felix nodded. Televised live on 3 channels, all the big boys will be there. He wants to announce his success, Grace said. He wants to announce Linda. He wants to show the world his glory, Felix agreed. Felix, Grace looked at him. Yes, ma. Can you get me into that gala? Felix grinned. Ma, I'm the main sponsor. For the next 3 days, Grace didn't sleep in a bathroom. She slept in a suite at the Eco Hotel. She ate. She rested. She pumped milk for her baby. Felix brought a team, a stylist, a makeup artist, a lawyer. They didn't just prepare her look, they prepared the evidence. They printed the bank statements. They downloaded the CCTV footage from the office. Felix had access to the security system because his company installed it. They compiled the voice notes. On the morning of the gala, Grace looked in the mirror. She didn't see the beggar. She didn't see the liability. She saw a warlord. Friday night. The civic center was glittering. The air smelled of expensive perfume and money. Lagos elite were there. Senators with their potbellies, governors with their convoys, oil tycoons with their young girlfriends. Richard stood on the stage wearing a white tuxedo. He looked like a king. Linda stood next to him in a red dress that was covered in crystals. It cost more than a Toyota Corolla. She was beaming, waving to the cameras. "Thank you all for coming," Richard bellowed into the mic. "Tonight is about excellence. It's about vision." The crowd clapped. "Behind every successful man is, well, himself," Richard joked. The men laughed raucously. "And a beautiful woman to support him," he added, kissing Linda's hand. Linda blushed for the cameras. "Tonight," Richard continued, "I want to share a video of my journey, my rise to the top, from nothing to billions." He pointed to the giant LED screen behind him. "Roll the tape!" The lights dimmed. The screen flickered. But it didn't show Richard's face. It didn't show the montage of trucks. It showed a WhatsApp chat. The crowd murmured. "What is this?" someone whispered. On the massive screen, a text message bubble appeared, clear as day. "Contact Linda, side chick. Message: she is in the hospital, screaming in pain. It's the perfect time to bring the papers. She won't read them. She is too drugged." The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Richard turned around, confused. "Technical team, cut the feed. What is this nonsense?" But the screen changed again. A video played. CCTV footage. It showed Richard sitting at his desk late at night. He was holding a pen. He was practicing a signature on a piece of paper, over and over again. Then he signed a document. He held it up and smiled. "I forged Grace's signature to steal the assets. Once she starves, she'll sign the divorce papers. She is too stupid to fight back." The silence in the hall was heavy, suffocating. Then a spotlight hit the back of the room. "You missed a part, Richard." The crowd turned. Grace walked in. She wasn't wearing rags. She was wearing a gold gown that looked like liquid fire. It hugged her body, showing she was strong, not broken. Her hair was done in a high, regal bun. Her face was beat to perfection. She walked down the center aisle. Felix walked a step behind her like a loyal bodyguard. "Grace?" Richard stammered on stage. His microphone was still on. How did you get in?" Grace climbed the stairs to the stage. She moved slowly. Every step was a sentence. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She stood in front of the microphone. "You called me a liability," she said. Her voice was calm, amplified through the speakers. "But liabilities don't build empires. Liabilities don't pay for the drivers who become billionaires. And liabilities don't keep the original copies of the land documents." She held up a file. "The house in Banana Island, the office in Victoria Island, the first 50 trucks, they are all in my name, Richard. You have been a tenant in my life for 10 years. Richard lunged for her. "Give me that!" Slam! 2 police officers tackled him before he could touch her. Chief Richard, the commissioner of police, who was a guest in the front row, stood up. "That looks like a confession on the screen, and attempted assault, and forgery." "It's a lie. It's AI.
It's deep fake, Richard screamed as they handcuffed him. Linda tried to sneak off the stage. She was trembling. And you, Grace turned to Linda. Linda froze. That Rolex on your wrist, Grace said. It was my anniversary gift to him. The receipt is in my name. Take it off. Linda's hands shook so hard she couldn't unclasp the watch. The earrings too. Linda took them off. And the wig. The crowd gasped. The wig, Linda. I paid for it at ShopRite. Remember when you laughed at my baby? Linda stared. Please, not here. Take it off. Linda pulled off the bone-straight wig, revealing her unkempt cornrows underneath. The cameras flashed. Flash. Flash. Richard was dragged off stage, shouting. Linda ran out covering her head, leaving her heels behind on the stage. Grace stood alone on the stage. The applause started slowly. One person, then two. Then the whole hall stood up. It became a roar. The mansion in Lekki had a new gate and a new rule. No one was turned away hungry. Every Friday, food was shared at the gate for the needy. Grace sat in her office, the real office. She was feeding her son Junior, who was now chubby and laughing. Tolu, the receptionist, walked in. Madam, the new trucks have arrived. The Z-Tech integration is complete. Thank you, Tolu. Grace looked out the window. She saw Felix's car driving in. He came for lunch every Sunday. He wasn't just a business partner. He was family. She was no longer just a wife. She was the CEO. She was the mother. She was the asset. Richard was denied bail. The fraud charges were heavy. The forgery evidence was undeniable. In Kirikiri prison, there is no AC, there is no champagne, there is no Linda. Linda had moved on to a senator the next week, claiming she was a victim of Richard's manipulation. Last week, Richard sent a letter to Grace through his lawyer. My wife, please, I am suffering. The mosquitoes here are biting me. The food is terrible. Send me some money for provisions. I am still the father of your son. She read it. She remembered the mosquito-infested BQ. She remembered the hunger at ShopRite. She took a pen. She wrote one line on the back of the letter. Sorry, I am just a liability, and liabilities have no value to give. She sent the letter back, empty. My people, hear me loud and clear. 1. Never bite the finger that fed you. You don't know who will hold the ladder when you are trying to climb down. 2. Silence is not weakness. Richard thought Grace was weak because she was quiet. He forgot that water is quiet, but it can drown a whole city. 3. Kindness is an investment. Grace invested in a driver named Felix. That investment yielded a return when she had nothing left. To every woman crying in a bathroom right now, wipe your tears. Your Felix is coming. Your story is not over. And to the Richards and Lindas of this world, enjoy your champagne, laugh at the poor, but check the screen behind you. Your movie is about to start. Share this story if you believe in divine justice.